This boy and girl coming home from school look quite content with life. And why not? They're looking forward to an important date, dinner at home with the family. First of all, daughter has changed from school clothes to something more festive. Dressing a little makes her feel and consequently look more charming. Even the table takes on a special air. Mother, too, changes from her daytime clothes. The women of this family seem to feel that they owe it to the men of the family to look relaxed, rested, and attractive at dinner time. Brother is spending an hour before dinner catching up on his homework. He has plans evening. Father, too, looks forward to this date with the family. He has had a hard day at the office, and in his briefcase are some contracts which must be looked over tonight. But in the meantime, he will relax at dinner with those he loves. These boys greet their dad as though they are genuinely glad to see him, as though they had really missed being away from him during the day and are anxious to talk to him. This is the time for pleasant discussion in a thoroughly relaxed mood. They don't pick this time of the day to spring unpleasant surprises on Dad. Ah, dinner time.
So that's how it happens at your house, right? They just decided to catch a couple shots of our family dinner at my house, and that's just how it is. Totally offensive on some levels, isn't it? Hey, ladies, no more sweats and messy bun for dinner, all right? So nothing but dresses. And guys, suit and tie for dinner. Way to go. Yeah, that's not where we're headed, okay? There's some things about this that actually are kind of awkwardly offensive, like, so brother's sitting down and he's studying, doing homework to prepare for a career, and daughter's doing setting the table because her highest aspiration in life is to set a nice table, right? She doesn't have to worry about her education. Like, there's some things that are backwards about this. Now, this was an actual video from 1950s talking about, how families, a healthy family should have dinner together. Now, we can mock it and make fun of it, but here's the truth. I mean, in the 1950s, they had dinner together more often than we do, right? For a lot of us. But if we shot videos of our family around dinner, we could probably mock each other mercilessly. And so if you want to go ahead and shoot a video of your family at dinner and send it in, we'd be happy to show it and mock it, okay? Reason why we're talking about table talk is this. There's three venues that families meet in and that hold conversations. One of them is the car. I mean, honestly, if you measured all the amount of time you spend together with your family during the week, sometimes you're in the car with each other more often than any other place during the week. But the truth is you're distracted, right? I mean, you're not getting face-to-face conversation. It's side-by-side conversation. And sometimes they're just in the back doing this, right? And other times, other than the car, the living room kind of is the other place where families meet. But the problem is this. There's something that hangs on the wall that is constantly on called TV. But maybe your family does not, like you don't all gather in the same room to hang out and watch TV together. Maybe you do it differently. You all go in your own rooms and you watch your own TVs so you don't have to miss the shows. No one? Yeah, a couple of you. Me too. So here's the third place. It's not just our cars. It's not just in the living room. It's our table. I mean, it's the table, whether it be in a living room or a dining room or around kind of an island bar stool. We all gather around some kind of table with our families. And I want to talk about the conversations that we have there. Because parents, none of us are like, you know what, hope my kids, they raise themselves. I'm just going to kind of turn them loose. And good luck, kids. I hope you grow up well. Like, none of us do that, right? We want to raise kids who know God and who are responsible people. And so because of that, we're trying to have significant conversations around the table. And so we're going to spend a couple weeks talking about table talk, the conversations that we want around the table that are spiritually influential. Here's the problem, though. Have you ever tried to have one of these talks? Like, let's bring up something that's meaningful around the table. And by the way, that's a bad lead-in. You don't say that to your family. All right, family, we're not going to talk about what you guys usually talk about. Let's talk about something meaningful. Junior, start. Go ahead. It just doesn't go well. Like, sometimes when we try to make that effort, that conversation's really awkward. And we want to try to move the conversation from awkward to authentic. Sometimes it's awkward because, honestly, our kids stink at having those kind of conversations. You know, you as a parent with all of your skills and good intentions come to the table and you're like, okay, let's have a meaningful conversation. But when your kids are this age right here, like they're looking at you like, all right. But they don't even have a voice at that moment. But then your kids, they find their voice to be able to communicate with you, and it sounds like this. And you're like, I wish they never found their voice. Like, truth be told, there's just moments you're like, I'd go back to silence if I could. But then it's interesting. By the time your kids are old enough to have that kind of talk with you that's meaningful, that's connecting, they're on to a whole different conversation that you're probably not even in the loop on. And, you know, I don't want to throw students under the bus. The truth is, sometimes parents, it's our kids that are available, and sometimes we're on to a different conversation that doesn't have to do with them. So I want to talk about table talk. I want to talk about what we do at dinner time, breakfast time, lunchtime, whatever time that we gather around the table together, and just ask, what are we talking about? And is there something there that is significant that's happening? One of the reasons they're awkward is because our kids aren't good at these kind of conversations. The second thing is this, though, is oftentimes those conversations are awkward because we just don't know how to do it. Did you have good, significant conversations around your table growing up? I was telling this series about what we were doing called Table Talk and brought it up to somebody, and this woman, she's around 65 years old, she made this statement, and it floored me. She just said, I never had a single significant conversation with my dad, ever. I was like, there's no way that that's true. So pushed her on it, just said, really, not one time did you ever, no, we didn't talk about anything. He was in construction, so he would go to work early in the morning, he'd come late, super exhausted when he got home, he'd lie down for a quick nap, and then kind of get up for dinner, and we'd get to dinner, and because he was kind of his own boss, his wife kept the books, and so the conversation around every meal was, did so-and-so pay his bill? What's the next project? Are we on schedule? And that became the family conversation. She said, I do remember one thing my dad ever said to me. She said, I was about 19, and I was getting ready, and I kind of used to put my hair back, and it was long. I put it back in kind of a little ponytail, hang down. And he said to me one time, he said, you know, you should really spend more time on your hair before you go out. I said, that's the one conversation you remember about your dad? And it's interesting because this woman has had to retool what it looks like to have conversations, and she's done a good job at building into her family's life because her dad has long since passed away. But the truth is, some of us, we didn't grow up this. Maybe we grew up with a TV dinner and a TV on and mom and dad not even there. I don't know, but it might be your past, but it doesn't necessarily have to be your future. Here's the other thing that makes it awkward sometimes. When you have conversations with your kids, we understand that they all go through a phase where they are trying to find a chink in your armor, right? They're trying to find something out about you so that you appear hypocritical. Okay, maybe not appear hypocritical, that you are hypocritical, or like that's their weakness. And the reality is there's some vulnerability required on our part as parents, because sometimes they'll ask us questions when we say, hey, when you're a high schooler, you should be kind of doing it like this. And they go, well, why don't you tell me what you were like in high school? Hey, do you have a report card that you had in high school? What was your GPA? Oh, 2.2 was a GPA? And all of a sudden you're like, hey kid, okay, the conversation's over. I'm going to pick silence over this table talk. Or, hey mom, how many boyfriends did you have? Hey dad, tell me about what college was like. And you're like, Truth be told, like, there's moments around table talk when your students get old enough that there's a certain vulnerability that it can be awkward. And so some of us, sometimes, we avoid it. Here's one of the mistakes that I've made. I've created awkward table talk conversations because I made the mistake of mistaking conversation for accountability. Did this just probably 3 weeks ago. I was at our house, and we sit around this island oftentimes in our kitchen to have dinner. And as we're doing that, you never get tired, and so you ask lazy questions. You know, you just kind of bring stuff up, and I'm just going to say to my kids whatever it is I'm thinking. And what I was thinking was, Hey, Courtney, did you talk to your teacher about that thing, that test, that grade, that whatever it is that you need to talk about? And Austin, did you talk to your coach, send that email off? And Kel, did you do that thing with the mortgage lady? And like, did you guys do your chores? And I'm just asking all these accountability questions, and you know what I got, right? Like, oh, when is this dinner going to be over? They're all eating as fast as they can. Like, done, Dad, here we go, we're out. Like, I wanted to create connection with each other, but instead I talked about chores. I talked about all the responsibilities that we had, and I didn't start a good conversation. Can I just say this? If you want a different kind of conversation around your table, if you want a different kind of talk, we have to start a different kind of conversation. It's going to start with us, parents. And so I just want to say this. Can we together try and move from table talk conversations that are meaningful, that are significant? And here's why this is really, really important. We've been studying our way through the book of Ephesians. If you have a Bible, digital device, pull that open real quick. It's only going to be one verse, and I just want you to take a look at this. We started in chapter 1. We've kind of moved chapters 1 through 4 in a series called Freedom Prayers. I'm just going to keep going in this book, and it lands in chapter 6, verse 4 right now. And I'm just going to start this series by looking at this one verse. And it's addressed to dads. And here's what it says, chapter 6, verse 4. Fathers, don't drive your children crazy. That's essentially what it says. The actual words are, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. So here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to spend 4 weeks about what does it look like for parents to bring kids up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. And we're going to center it on this. How are we talking around the table? What does the conversation look like? Now, disclaimer for you. Some of you, you don't have kids yet. Some of you hope you never have kids. Whatever your hopes and aspirations are. Some of your kids are all grown up and they're gone and they're away from your family. Some of you have grandkids. Let me just say this. This series is not going to land in everyone's lap the same way. I was trying to figure out, so what will somebody do if maybe they're married and they don't have kids? Well, they're still married, right? So shouldn't the conversation around the table still be somewhat like they're spiritual questions or good questions? We're getting to know each other, or how are you doing with God? Like the table talk can still be developed, right? And I was thinking, well, if somebody's single and they're living alone, like what does table talk look like for them? Well, hey, you're going to love your company because it's just you. No, I was thinking this. You still have dinners with people and meals with people and conversations with people. What would it look like for you to maybe guide the conversation in a way that might actually be open to spiritual things? So here's what I'm going to say. Take whatever it is that we're talking about in the scriptures here and apply it to your life in a way that you see fit. You're an expert on your life, so figure it out. You're all responsible. I'm for you. But I don't want to overpromise and just say, hey, no, this series is going to apply to everybody. It might not. Take what's good. Take what God says. You understand this scripture and let the rest go if it doesn't apply to you. And have a lot of grace because we got a lot of parents in the room. Truth be told, some of us are begging for a different conversation around the table. So, what does this mean? To bring our kids up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. I'm going to give you two main things here. And we're not going to solve this today. This is just an introduction. And maybe today you might just assess what the conversation is like around the table. So here it is. Number one, what does it mean to bring our kids up in the training and instruction of the Lord? I think it's first and foremost this. It's raising kids who have a relationship with Christ. And that might be like, wow, Pastor, that's super deep. We knew that. But how come at my table at my house, and I'm guessing your table at your house, the conversation talks about being responsible more than anything else? Hey, did you do this? Hey, are you growing? Behave yourself. Elbows off the table. Or maybe you gave up on that a long time ago. That was my mom's deal. Like, I know to eat like this and not like this. Like, just drove her crazy. I spent 18 years of my life driving that woman crazy. Praise the Lord. She'll tell you that too. But how much of our conversations with our kids is about how to handle money and how to talk nice and how to clean our rooms and how to do their chores and how to do their homework and how to handle their academics? I think we're so focused on raising responsible kids that we forget that the highest goal is not responsible kids. The highest goal that we have for our kids is that they have a relationship with Christ. And that's going to require a couple things. The first is this. The first thing, if they're going to have a relationship with Christ, is they have to accurately know who God is. Meaning this, they have to have a correct theology. I know that sounds weird, like correct theology. I thought we were talking about parenting. Well, if they're going to have a relationship with God, don't they have to know who he is? And I don't mean like, do you know God? Well, I know there's a God, but who is he? Well, time out. The Christian faith is that God has revealed himself in the Old Testament, and then after the Old Testament, there's a time where his son, Christ, comes. In the book of Hebrews, it says that Jesus is the exact representation of who God is. If you want to know who God is, all you have to do is figure out who Jesus is. He comes to the earth, talks with people. He's there for 33 years, 3 of those doing significant public ministry. We know who Jesus is historically. And if we know him, then we get to know who God is. If we want to know God's character, all we have to do is look at Jesus. Do our kids know who Jesus is? I mean, do they know the stories about him? Do they know accurately? Because it's not enough to say, oh, I know God. We don't get to know God unless we know Jesus. Do our kids have an accurate picture of who God is? Because they'll hear a lot of things in this world about who God is, but is it accurate? The second thing is this. It's not just accurate about who God is. It has to be accurate about how they see themselves. And I'm just saying this. They have to have an accurate knowledge about Christianity, meaning this. It's not just about who God is. It's about who you are. Do you know who people are in relationship with God? Because let me point it out this way. We grew up and still grow up in a merit-based society, right? You do something good at work, you're supposed to be rewarded for it. You do something good at school, you're rewarded with a grade for it. You do something good on the athletic field, you're rewarded for it. We live in a merit-based society, don't we? But the Christian faith, people get this messed up all the time. It is not a merit-based society. The merit was paid for by Christ on the cross. He died so that we could be in relationship with God. We didn't do anything for it. Do we have an accurate understanding about who we are before God? That even when we sin today, that God still loves us? Once we've been adopted into his family, do people understand that you can disappoint God, but it doesn't mean he unadopts you? Do we understand that? Do our kids know that? I think sometimes our merit-based society gives us a false understanding about what the Christian life is. Here's the third thing. Now think about this. If our highest goal is to have our kids to have a relationship with Christ, they have to know who he is. They then have to know who they are, what Christianity is. But the third thing is this. Do we put in their tool bags some skills, some abilities to have this relationship with God? The Bible will call these like spiritual disciplines. We often, man, this is so weird. I'm telling us, we're talking about how to have table talk with our kids, and I'm using words like theology and spiritual discipline. Let me simplify it. If we want our kids to have a relationship with God, do we teach them how to talk to him? Prayer. Do we teach them more than just, hey, God, would you give me this? Do we teach them, hey, God, this is what's going on in my world. I'm struggling with this, and I want to make this request of you. God, I just want to thank you for this. Do we raise grateful kids? Do we raise kids who can actually have a conversation with God? Or does it feel like they're just talking and the words are bouncing off the ceiling and coming back? When our kids have a problem, do they actually take that problem and verbalize it to God? God, this is what's going on in my world. And do they know that when they pray those problems to God and say, God, this is what's happening in my world, that they can go back to God's word and look for the answer and see how God answers? Do our kids know how to listen to God so that they might actually, when they're sensing, God, I'm hearing a whisper from you, and I think you're answering the thing that I was praying for? Do our kids know how to do that? Because they're going to learn it from us as parents. And that's a big one, parents. I mean, do we know how to do that? And so do our kids have these relationship skills to have a relationship with God? So the first part is this. I mean, do they have a relationship with God? The knowledge and the skills. The second, though, is this, and I don't want to miss this because I think our world misses this. Goes totally against the grain of our culture. The second thing is this. Are we raising kids who actually follow Jesus? Our society is one that prides itself on rights. I have the right to this and I have the right to that, and no one else can infringe on my rights. It's the American way, right? And it's something that's great about our society. Somebody can do something, and as long as it's legal, no one's going to infringe upon their rights to say that or to do that. But the interesting thing, it's not a biblical way to live. What I mean by that is this. Our culture will tell you, you know what, it's okay to believe in God if you want to, but it's your life. I mean, that's your money. It's your career. It's your relationships. It's your this. It's your that. And you have a right to do what you want to do. It's your life. Take that thought about what the Christian life is and start reading the New Testament. Because it's not actually biblical. It's not Christianity. If we're raising kids who actually follow Jesus, here's what we're doing. God, I give you authority that if you show me from your word or reveal to me that something is true, that's how I will live regardless of the consequences. Have we bowed our knee to God to say, God, whatever you want me to do, I'm going to do that? It's so un-American, but it's actually biblical. Because we can say that, but when it comes down to it and we have to make a decision that goes against the grain of culture, like how we date, like how we handle our relationships, how we handle our money, and the rest of the culture is going to be like, why would you do that? Like, whoa. There's some guidelines here. There's some things that God has set up in the scriptures giving us guidance in this. That's how I live. People will think you're crazy, and that's okay. What we have to come to grips with is this. The guidelines that God gives us in his word, it's actually the good life. It's actually the life that has way less regrets than what our culture experiences. It's actually the life that leads to great marriages, happy families. God didn't put guidelines in the scriptures to make us miserable and bored. He did it so that we could have life and have it to the full, is what John 10:10 says. So, raising kids, to know who God is, to have a relationship with him, and give him permission. And here's the permission part. It's the difference between having Jesus as your Savior and having him as your Lord. One says, yeah, heaven sounds great. I want to go to heaven. But the other is, while I'm here on earth, God, I want you in charge of my life. Do we teach our kids that? How do we talk about that around the table? So it says this, bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. But the verse doesn't start there. Here's what it says. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. I just think it's kind of funny that God knows this already. He put those together in the same verse for a reason. Like, he starts with that because he knows this. Dads, if you actually try and raise your kids in the training and instruction of the Lord, you'll drive them crazy sometimes. You might get it wrong and exasperate your kids and frustrate them, but let me give you a disclaimer, Dad, okay? Let me give you a little permission, a little freedom here. Just because your kids roll their eyes doesn't mean you're exasperating them. Just because they're fed up with something doesn't mean that you're being a bad dad and you're too hard on them, you're driving them crazy. When someone's going to bring someone else up in training, they're not going to like it all the time. Suck it up, Buttercup. Just saying, in our house. Biblical raising kids that way. Like I said, take what's good and leave the rest behind, okay? The thought is what does it look like to frustrate our kids and exasperate them? I'm not sure all of us would agree what that looks like. Let me show you a parenting diagram real quick. I'm sure you've probably seen this before because you might err on one of two sides. You've seen this before? I mean, on the top spectrum up there is relationship. On the low side is to the left, high side is to the right. But on the left side, the up and down, the vertical, is all about rules. This is rules versus relationship. Let's just talk about 4 combinations. In the number 1 spot, when your relationship with your kids is low, meaning the connection that you have with them, they sense that you are for them, that you love them. And I know you told them you loved them when they were 3, but they're 13 right now, and sometimes they doubt that. You just don't have this emotional connection with each other, not just you to them, but them to you. They just haven't invested much time there. If a relationship is low and the rules are low, meaning they're 7 years old and they're out till 9:30 at night. You're not sure where they're at. There's very little rules. I know some of you are horrified. You should be. that person is actually called a neglecter. When your rules are low and your relationship is low, you're essentially saying, good luck, kid. Hey, figure it out. Good luck on figuring out what it looks like to walk with Christ. Hope you do okay in school. None of us are that in this room, I think. The second one is this. If you're really high on the rules, like you got it, it's like the 10 commandments of what it's like to grow up in your house. And you're like, here it is. And each commandment is broken up into 10 other ways that you should do that. So you got 100 rules in your house, and they're posted on, right when they walk in the front door. They're reminded every day what the rules look like. Don't be looking at your spouse, nudging them like, this is you. Rules are good. They're not all bad. But when you're high on the rules and you're low on the relationship without a connection, that person's a dictator. And I know that it is a parenting style. I'm not sure it's the best style. If you've ever made the comment, listen, kid, I brought you into this world, I can take you out of this world, you might just be leaning towards the dictator side. Just saying. Sometimes dictators, it's hard to know where we lie. The third box is this. If you are high on the relationship, you're like, I hug my kids every day. My kids know that I love them. We hang out all the time. We watch the same shows on TV. We are so good together. And yet there's no guidance, there's no boundaries, there's not a discipline. Hey, if you do this, these are the consequences. You can't remember the last time that you actually discipline your kids, even though you know they do stuff wrong all the time. You're the BFF. The funny thing about it is that our kids actually crave rules. They crave boundaries. We've had, growing up when I was a kid, we had dinner the same time almost every night, even though both my parents worked, and they did a great job in trying to provide that kind of atmosphere. And when I kind of hit the late teenagers, man, my younger sisters really messed that up, and their schedules got busy, but whatever. But we would have friends who would come over and just want to be a part of something that had structure because their family had no structure. They could stay out till whenever, and it wasn't that they wanted to. They wanted somebody home and present for them. And by the way, this series is not to create any guilt or anything like that, but the concept is this. We want connection with our kids, high relationship. But we also want rules with our kids that provide them structure, guidance, and boundaries, because we can't hope our kids turn out with a relationship with God and following God. We have to build that in there. High relationship, high rules, I think that's called a biblical parent. Now, there's helicopter parents too, right? So you got to figure out what's the appropriate amount of rules and what that looks like. Because truth be told, I think one of the reasons why there's a husband and a wife, a mom and a dad in a family is to kind of balance each other out. Because here's how it works in our family. Man, when I lose my mind with my kids, my wife is like, you need to back off. She is like my sounding board. And maybe once or twice in our whole parenting, maybe my wife has been, not as reasonable. And I was able to in those one or two times. Say, honey, maybe we should. She gets it right way more than I do. I guarantee it. But out of this, don't you get it wrong sometimes? I do. Question, when you're tired, when you're hungry, when you're having a bad day, what direction do you head? And by the way, each of our kids is unique, huh? Each of our kids is unique, that they need something a little bit different. They never need a neglector. But some of your kids won't need as many rules as the other one. But we all desire deep connection with our kids, don't we? So if we desire deep connection, and if we need boundaries, we need to start a different kind of conversation around the table. So here's all I want to do this week. I just want to bring up this to you and say, maybe where do you sit as a parent? And on your worst days, where do you lean to? What are the catch safes when you go, I'm catching myself moving in that direction. I need to, what do you do? And the last thing is this, just how do you assess your current table talk? How's it going? If it's going great, awesome. Here's what I wanted to do today. I just wanted to open up some tools for you to say, here's some tools that we have for you that might create a different conversation around the table. So here's what we did. In the back, there's some baskets around there, and our ushers will have these. On your way out, just grab one per family. And inside here is, there's a series of cards. They're just table talk cards. And the first one right here, it just tells you the instructions on how to have this conversation. And on here, the very first one, you'll see this. There's a you card. And at dinner, here's what we're going to invite you to do. Have a meal together at least 3 times in 1 week. Every week for the next 4 weeks, I want you to have at least 3 meals together. I'm hoping that's not asking too much, okay? But we didn't want to shoot too high. Some of you you're like, we do dinner every night at 6:30. Awesome, this will be easy for you then. At dinner, here's what I want you to do. Pull a card, and it says you. Everybody just answer the you question. It's not like, do you love Jesus? Like, it's not that kind of question. It's just to delve into, hey, what's going on in your world? Who are you? And by the way, it can be a great question, and and it doesn't have to be your question, because last week, I'm sitting at my table and at home and having dinner with my family, and we're talking. I didn't have these. And I asked a question, and my son looks at me and he's like, Dad, seriously, you need new questions. I got him. Here we go. And then after that, once everybody answers that, on the other side, it says God. There's a God question. That question might work awesome for your family. It might not work at all for your family. Pull another card, all right? But we just wanted to help you and give you a tool that might help ask questions and start a different conversation around the table. You say, well, I'm not, we don't have any kids. It's just husband and wife. Hey, if you're a husband and wife and, you take this and try it with each other, because your spiritual lives matter too, and you're going to sharpen each other and influence each other. And so my invitation to you is this: 3 times a week, grab a meal together, pull a card. The goal is this: we're trying to help parents create connection and spiritual content, because we frustrate our kids. We exasperate them when we don't have any spiritual content and boundaries. And we also frustrate them when we don't have any relational connection with them. That's what exasperates our kids. So my invitation to you is this: take this and use it as a tool for the next 4 weeks, all right? Let me give you some freedom and permission. Maybe your family is running so crazy and you have like 12 kids, all right? Whatever, God bless you. Maybe your dinner time together is gonna be in a minivan between band practice and soccer practice. Just take them with you, all right? If it's Taco Bell in a minivan in a parking lot, still pull out a card, okay? Can I give you even more permission? Hey, listen, if you're a single parent and you're the only one bringing up spiritual conversations at the table, go for it. I mean, grab this tool and don't wait for somebody else to encourage you in this thing. You just go for it and do it. If you're a grandparent and you want to, you have access to your grandkids, I would save these at the table for when you see your grandkids and maybe pull them out. Because one of the things I love about our family circumstances right now is we have grandparents, my parents and Kelly's parents, that'll come up every now and then. And they have a way of speaking into our kids' lives that's just different than us. See, when my wife and I, when we do it, it comes across sometimes as nagging to our kids. You've heard this before? And but the reality is when grandparents come in town, they can say the same thing to our kids, and they might actually hear it. It's funny when the thing that happens every single time is they always get compared to Grandma, Kelly's mom, because she's about this tall. And it's always like, oh, look, did Courtney, did they outgrow Grandma yet? And it's kind of one of those like, oh, look, Austin's now 3 inches taller, which, by the way, is not a big accomplishment to be taller than Grandma. I mean, she's... So now like Austin's like above her, and it's just so funny because when they come in town, there's this physical growth measurement. You know what it also is measured? When grandparents haven't seen their grandkids for a while, they can back up and go, wow, I love how you've matured. I love how you've grown. See, we're in the mix of it. We're in the wrestling match of parents parenting our kids, and we don't get to see the growth or recognize it all the time. Sometimes the view of who our kids are, sometimes parents, we recognize growth the least. And other people can back up and go, wow, how you've changed, how you've become more responsible. You brush your teeth every day now. That's amazing. It's cool, though. And so whatever your life circumstance, I pray that this is a blessing to you and that you do this. You know why this is so important? It's because they ain't going to be around forever. We're in the season in our household. Our daughter's 17, and she was singing up here this morning. And she's not going to be there forever. And this is not going to be an emotional morning, all right? But she's not. You know, we're counting down the year and not celebrating. We're just like, okay, we got a year. We got to cram a lot into this year, right? All your spiritual development in 1 year, kid. Get ready. We've been having table talks since they were little kids and working on this. But they're not going to be around forever. Hey, students. They're not going to be around forever. I'm not talking about the students. I'm talking about your parents. There's a time where you're going to leave their house, and they will not be around forever, meaning they won't be around for that talk. Yeah, you can call them. Yeah, you can email them. But in our stage of life where we're at, we were sitting around the table the other day, Kelly and I, and we were sitting there talking, and all of a sudden I see Kelly's kind of eyes got red and kind of tearing up. And I was like, what did I do? Because that's usually what's going on. I did something wrong. She goes, no. She goes, man, our parents are kind of at the 70 range. Not that life's over, okay? We're not checking them in anywhere. Their health is great, but you ever have that pause moment where you're like, oh, our parents aren't 50 anymore. Our parents aren't 60 anymore. Wow, our parents, where did it go? 60? Now they're 70. And like, they're all in good health, but they're definitely in the fourth quarter, all right? Good football analogy for today. They're definitely in the fourth quarter. And we just realized they're not going to be around forever. Dads, don't exasperate your kids, but bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord, because they ain't going to be around forever, and neither will you. And parenting goes by so fast that even when we get tired and even when we get frustrated, don't give up. Have great table talks, because it's more than just responsibility you're trying to teach our kids. I want to teach them how to have a relationship with Christ. Amen? One where they thrive, not just survive. So if you're up for it for 4 weeks, I hope you'll grab these and have great conversations with your family around the table. Let's bow and pray. God, thanks. Thanks for our parents. Thanks for the ones who not just gave us life by God, but they give us encouragement. That in this moment, I know that for some people, this is going to be more challenging because growing up with their parents was rough and there's still some wounds there. God, I pray through this series, maybe you would heal some of that. But God, I also want to just stop and pause and thank you for the parents in the room, because they're given the best they have with what they have. And so God, I pray that you would help great conversation to take place. And God, I would ask that you would be with our kids, that you would help them to be open to this. That if there's something standing in the way of relationships, of the connection that parents have with their kids, that you would surface that, heal that, and God, help us as parents to be humble enough to hear it. But God, we would ask that you would make great table talk conversation, and the reality is this, is we pray that as they grow into adulthood, that they would have a tremendous relationship with you, that they would be people who have great faith. And so thank you for the opportunity to talk about this, for your word to guide us, and for us to respond well. If you're up for having these conversations and you agree with it, would you say amen?